I'm Aryeh Schwartz, and welcome to the WNBAinsidr Show. This episode, we have a special guest, Erik Beck, WNBAinsidr Lynx beat reporter. We got Erik Beck with us. Erik is the WNBAinsidr Lynx beat reporter, and we are going in on the Lynx. Recently, today, the Minnesota Lynx made even more preseason moves. If you like our show, please consider joining our Patreon community. For less than a cup of coffee a month, you can directly show support for the hard work we do covering the W. Erik, let's dive right in, say hi to the folks, and then I want to know, what's your gut reaction to these trades?
Hi to the folks. I think it was kind of a couple of no-brainer trades for the Lynx. I mean, obviously they're giving up on, really drafting next season. I think, they gave up their second round pick and their third round pick, but I think it makes total sense for them. If you can get Stephanie Talbot for a second round pick and Elena Coates for, who was the former second overall pick for a third rounder isn't probably going to make the team anyway. Those are two super low risk, high reward trades.
Yeah, definitely. And I think with Coates, at least, you have to think about it, at least whenever I think of young players in the W, you want to give them, honestly, almost like 5 years before you can really start talking about, is this a bust? Or what do we see? What do we expect from this person's career? And with Coates, missing that whole first season, getting a few minutes in last year, I think it's going to be an interesting one. What type of role or what do you see her doing for this team in a positive light?
For Coates?
Yeah.
I think she's going to be probably playing a lot of the backup center minutes, at least early on in the season when Tammy Fag-Benley is playing with her national team. It's both of these moves have made it really interesting, like who the Lynx are going to cut. I think both Talbot and Coates are making the team, but they still probably, if Zandalcini and Tammy Fag-Benley are coming back later in the season, they still have one more cut to make. And so you sort of have to figure out who that is. It might end up being Tammy. I don't know. It's her contract expires at the end of this season, so she's not on contract for next season. And Coates, has 4 more years under contract. I expect it to be probably one of those two, unless they decide that, they haven't signed Zandalcini yet, so they might say, but they do have the exclusive rights to her. So they might decide to say, well, we're just going to roll with what we have. I don't expect them to do that because they kind of need as much shooting as they can get, but it could be one of the ways they go.
Well, I would be interested. I mean, there are a few other people on this roster that, if you want to keep that. Personally, Zandalcini has that flexibility to play the 3, play the 4 if you need, and honestly, I think could play the 2 also. But what about Larkins? Is that someone who might be someone who gets cut in the end?
I think probably. I think that there's sort of a 9-player rotation that has been, the main rotation for the preseason. That's, the starters being Danielle Robinson, Simone Augustus, Karima Christmas-Kelly, Damaris Dantas, and Sylvia Fowles, and then the bench being Odyssey Sims, Lexi Brown, Nafisa Collier, and Jessica Shepard. I think those players are all definitely on the team. And I sort of have a hard time, even if it's just sort of late draft picks, I don't see the Lynx, giving up assets for players that aren't going to be on the roster, at least for part of the season. So I kind of suspect that the last two cuts of the preseason, now that they've waived Kenesha Bell and Jillian Elaney, will probably be Erlina Larkins and Xiao Ting.
Yeah, and we'll get into Shouting in a moment because there's some conflict. You know what? Let's just do it now, and then we'll get back to Talbot. There's been
Sure.
some conflicting reports because I've seen some people in various different outlets claim that Xiao has a guaranteed contract, and the reason, for those of you who aren't aware, the reason that this is so interesting is in the W, like if you have a guaranteed contract, you're taking the hit towards your salary cap, no matter what, even if you cut them, unless you trade them away and a different team takes it on. That contract is guaranteed. If that's true that Xiao Ting is getting that, that would be a pretty tough one because then you might as well just keep her.
Right. I thought I'd heard something that maybe that wasn't precisely true, but that was the original report that I heard as well. Though it should be noted that she does have sort of an absolute minimum contract. She's signed for like 41,965 according to High Post Hoops salary database, and that's sort of that's the amount that like Kenesha Bell was signed for as a late third round pick. So maybe they're willing to eat that salary. I'm not sure, but maybe it's not. Maybe it's not fully guaranteed. I'm not totally clear on that, but it might not be a big deal either way for them to
I
come
mean,
in.
look, this is reason 1,000,000,005 why we need a little bit more clarity, a little bit more transparency from the league and from the teams in regards to salary stuff. And there has to be, I understand, maybe you don't, it's not good for the league to get out salary information. That's just my little rant. But at a certain point, it's hard for us as people trying to break down the moves, break down the future moves and the impact of these moves towards the season without knowing the ins and outs of these contracts. And there has to be a way we can find a compromise. WNBA, I will find a compromise with you. Let's figure it out. Let's move back, though. Talbot. What does Talbot coming to the team mean as far as three-pointing, scoring for some other players possibly? I know you mentioned off mic, this might have something to do with Karima Christmas Kelly. Talk to me what you're thinking. What's going through your mind right now?
So, I mean, I think that this is a move that you make regardless. Like, if the opportunity comes up to get more shooting on this team, I think you have to do it. Especially, Stephanie Talbot played such an important role on the Phoenix Mercury last year. I was kind of surprised that they were willing to give her up for what they did. But yeah, it's going to be now, I think, kind of a crowded wing rotation. If you've got Simone Augustus, Karima Christmas Kelly, Nafisa Collier, Lexi Brown, Odyssey Sims, all kind of at the 2 and the 3, and now you're throwing Talbot in there. Somebody is going to end up playing a lot less than maybe they should or they could. I do wonder if this is partially due to it's possible that Karima Christmas Kelly is still working her way back from injury and that she is going to see more restricted minutes than maybe we thought initially, and that Simone Augustus may have less minutes this year than before just to save up for a deep postseason run. But yeah, I mean, they're going to have to make some tough decisions both in roster cuts and in the rotation, because I mean, there's a lot of players here that probably ought to be seeing minutes, but it's going to be hard to get them for everybody.
Yeah, it's going to be tough. And we were talking before we got on the mic about how this is kind of starting to reminisce of an older Lynx team where you started. I mean, for the past few years, there's been a huge gap as far as the starting five and the bench. And that's slow. I mean, let's be real. It's partially due right now to a few 3 of their starters disappearing, but the gap has started to close. With that in mind, where do you think these Minnesota Lynx stack up compared to the rest of this league?
Well, they don't have sort of the depth of all-star talent that they've had, in the past, or, even compared to some of the rosters that have been put together by some other teams this year. It, but I do think that depth is a major strength of theirs, and I don't know that there's many teams in the league that have quite the depth of talent that they do. It's hard before any games have been played to kind of put them in kind of the top four. I think those are, at least for the moment, occupied by probably Phoenix, LA, Connecticut, and Las Vegas, just in terms of sheer number, high level talent that those teams have. But I think that this is going to be a really, really competitive Lynx team, and they're not going to be easy to beat on any given night.
They're really not. I mean, also look, we know a few things about Cheryl Reeve. She's going to put a competitive team out there, and she's going to put a team that is going to be an honest defensive team. The question has always been, and the question was last year, can they score? Can they score? Can they score? And I don't think we necessarily have a complete answer for that, but Talbot definitely adds to that, right?
Right. Well, in the 2017 season where Sil won her MVP, the Lynx might not have ultimately taken as many threes as their opponents did, but they ended up making more threes for the season. I think they shot probably 37%. I think spacing the floor around Sylvia Fowles is sort of the key to having a pretty great offense, even without, some of those, you know, superstars that the Lynx have had in past seasons. Uh, they've got a lot of people who can score. I mean, Odyssey Sims is going to be playing a major role on this team. Obviously, already has put up some big numbers in the preseason. A couple of 20-point games. She's got a super green light for the season. Uh, but there's going to be a lot of scoring by committee. If every player on the roster or in the rotation scores 8 to 10 points, you're in a pretty good spot.
Well, talk to me about. We don't even need to necessarily get into this, but the other night, what was Odyssey's 3-point stat right there? Because a lot of people talking about Odyssey.
I think it was 5 of 7. It was, yeah, that
That helped
helps.
a lot. That helped a lot. All right, well, let's talk real quick though. What do you imagine for this Minnesota Lynx starting five in the 2018 season?
Like, who do I think it's going to be? I
Yeah.
think it's still going to be the same that we've seen in the preseason. That might change as time goes on. Obviously, with new acquisitions, you never know exactly what it's going to be. But I think you're still looking at sort of the D-Rob, Simone, Karima, Demirostantis, Sil starting five. But I just think they're going to rely on the bench a lot more this season than maybe they have in the past.
And hopefully that season can, give them some confidence because we definitely did not see that last year. Talk to me. We've heard Cheryl talk a lot about changing play style. The things we've done in the past worked, but now maybe they're not working as well. What do you expect that will translate to as far as actual things?
Well, in terms of what they're keeping the same, I think they're still really committed to being really tough to play against on the defensive end and rebounding the hell out of the ball. I think those are two things that are going to remain consistent in their identity. I know that they want to shoot more threes, and you're sort of starting to see the dividends of that kind of progressing through the preseason. The first game they only took 14 threes and made one. This last game against the Las Vegas Aces, they took 29 and made 10. Now, a lot of that was Odyssey going 5-7, but if as long as people are shooting them, you're going to have maybe somebody going off and any given night, and as long as you're getting people more comfortable with that, uh, the offense has a serious potential to take off. I think the other main thing about this team is that they're going to be a lot faster than they were last year. I mean, they've got a lot of new young legs, and all of the veterans that they signed in the offseason are under 30, kind of right in their prime. With Danielle Robinson and Odyssey Sims, you're going to see a lot of dribble penetration to kickouts and then lobs to Sill. Um, I think they'll get a lot of points in transition, and I think, or just from pressuring in the backcourt, getting a steal, taking it right to the rim. I think that's going to be a
Well,
major strength of this team.
oh, I think that's definitely been a focus as far as player movement. But something I really want to ask you, just in regard to, we've seen a lot of this motion as far regarding the roster. Maya Moore, obviously a huge headline for the Minnesota Lynx, and basically the question that I want to ask you is, what do you think this roster and all these moves means for 2020? You're having a Minnesota Lynx team where possibly, it's not guaranteed, but possibly you got Rebecca Brunson coming back, Maya Moore coming back. Let's put on our thinking caps and imagine a little bit what this could mean.
Yeah, well, I'm going to throw in, obviously you've got to re-sign Cecilia Zandalasini, but you've also got, another suspended contract in Kelsey Griffin, who could see minutes at the 3 and the 4 as well. I think sort of a clear strategy, in sort of a 2-year plan kind of way, has been to overload this team with talent such that you can't possibly sign everyone, and then just choose the best available options and really cut it down so that you're getting the best team possible. It's going to be tough to make a bunch of these cuts. There could be, depending on how various players play this year, you might see some, big trades again next offseason. You might just see a couple players that they just let go. I feel like if Myers and potentially Brunson are coming back next season, I think that this roster might be just about the best in the league.
Ooh, is it? I don't know, but I'm gonna classify that as a hot take.
I hope it's not a hot take, honestly, but I just think you look at sort of the depth of talent on the roster and just the number of great, really good players that they've been able to bring in. I think you bring back, some of your proven kind of superstar vets. They're going to be real tough to beat. I know that there's kind of more talent in the league than ever, but that that would be a very, very, very good team.
That it's going to be tough to beat them, and also look, you cannot overlook the coaching. I do. I'm so excited to see how this year plays out and where the Lynx stack up. I mean, I think a lot of people are kind of dropping Seattle to a bubble playoff team now with the Sue Bird news that came out today, also.
Right.
Which I'll be honest, it's hard when you look at the rosters of these teams and the schedules to figure out, who are going to be these teams that don't make the playoffs. I think a lot of people have quickly assumed the Liberty and the Fever are not making it. Fine, I'll give you that for now. But even with that, like, you're talking about a possibility of some really good teams not being able to make the playoffs this year. And I think we'd be foolish if we didn't at least talk about the possibility of the Lynx not making the playoffs, which is almost like just blasphemy, if you will. But now, after the Storm news and these more moves that the Lynx are making, I'd say it's pretty secure that they make the playoffs. Would you agree?
Oh, absolutely. I think it's really hard at this point to imagine them missing the playoffs without, some significant injuries happening, which hopefully they don't. Had enough of those already this offseason. I mean, the thing it's just tough in this league. I mean, there's so much talent, but everything is relative, and somebody has to lose. And it's, if you're even a half step behind the other teams, you're going to rack up those losses pretty quick.
Yeah, and you can't have another, what was it? The Lynx opened the season last year, and it just was bad.
Yeah.
3-6. I mean, it was, and all fire sale, everyone kept, oh, no, it's okay. And then all of a sudden people started to realize this is not the Lynx that we're used to. I'm excited for a team that we're going to see a lot less late second, just throw the ball to Maya Moore's hands and hope she can get a shot off. Who do you think, obviously there's a lot of people on the roster and we can be talking bench, whatever, but who do you think is going to be the go-to, deep in the shot clock, you take the shot?
Well, I mean, if they can't funnel the ball to Sill, which is what they're desperately trying to do probably on most possessions, I wouldn't be surprised if it was Odyssey for a lot of the time, even if she's coming off the bench. I think she's going to be playing pretty big minutes, but otherwise it's, there's an emphasis on players not passing up open shots when, especially threes. Like if you're open for three, take it is basically, I think, the mantra that is being told to the players so far this year, and that's going to be a major emphasis for them. But yeah, I'd say Odyssey is actually a pretty good candidate.
Well, I wouldn't disagree. I mean, especially because every interview, everything I've heard anybody on the roster or in the staff say has just been, Odyssey, you got 5 green lights. Take it, take it. And I've seen a lot of people snap back and say, look at what's been going on over the past year. Can she really be that good of a player? And I do think she has that element. Again, if she goes back to what we saw 2 seasons ago, we're talking about a player who could legitimately, push this team to a contender. And I realize a lot of people are going to stand there and say you're crazy, but honestly, Odyssey Sims was like next level. I mean, I remember having conversations with people saying, Chelsea Gray, Odyssey Sims, you're talking about 2 players who could win the MVP award. And that was obviously short-lived, but there's something to be said about that. Who do you think is going to be the most underrated but impactful player on this roster?
Ooh, underrated. That's tough to say. I mean, it's I think it's, in one thought I would have would be Jessica Shepard. She's been playing great so far in preseason. Just with her rebounding, her quick outlet passes, just her passing in general. But maybe also Lexi Brown. Her ability to knock it down from the outside is going to be really important. I'm not going to say Nafisa Collier because I think people expect her to do a lot, actually, being sort of that first round pick. But I think she's going to be doing a lot of little things that might not show up on the stat sheet, but are going to be tremendously impactful. I should mention before also, of course, the ball is probably going to go to Simone for late clock situations also.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Take one of the greatest one-on-one players in the history of the game and, let her go to work.
Oh, yeah. Glad you're the one who was shouting her out on this and not me.
Yeah. Yeah, fair enough. I can't believe I didn't think of it quicker. But, yeah, seriously.
Well, any last thoughts that you want to throw at the fans in regard to the Minnesota Lynx in this coming season before we log off?
Just to pay attention to some of those front court minutes, I think. Just who's playing, who's not playing, who's making impact, because it's going to be that's where you're going to see sort of the roster decisions being made both this season and next off season.
Follow the minutes. That's a smart tale from a smart man. We at the WNBA Insider believe in the W and the community deserve the same in-depth analysis and respect that men's sports receive on a daily basis. Please consider joining our Patreon community to help support us and the hard work we do.